Hi guys. Now continuing again with where we stopped in the last video. Over the last three sessions, we discussed about a few important viceroys of India. Initially, we saw the period of um, smart silence by the British, where the viceroys like Canning, like Elgin, like Mayo, tried to stay away from Indian politics. By the time of late 19th century onwards, everything in India was going to change. Now, let us look into today's session, where we'll be discussing two very important viceroys, Lord Lytton and Lord Ripon. Now, both of these viceroys played a substantially big role in actually altering the path of India's future. Now, this is your guy, this is your faculty, Ranganathan S.V.N. Kondala, and I'm discussing with you Indian history, modern India, Viceroys of India session. Do like, follow, and subscribe me on this channel. Now, let us begin. Lord Lytton. In the year 1876, Edward Robert Lytton Bulwer Lytton, first Earl of Lytton, also just commonly known as Lord Lytton, arrived in India. Now, he was going to be staying in India for the next 4 years. Now, Lytton has always been a controversial viceroy because of his handling of the Great Indian Famine in 1876-78, the Second Anglo-Afghan War, and the way he actually conducted the Delhi Darbar mainly gave him the name a ruthless viceroy. Lytton was always considered to be racist, completely unfit of British India. Lytton was born in 1831. Similar to most of the viceroys before him, he comes from a very established family. He was born to Bulwer Lytton and Rosina Doyle Wheeler. His mother was an outspoken supporter of women's rights, which put her at odds with the conservative father. I mean, so he kind of had a difficult life at home. In 1849, Lord Lytton joined the diplomatic corps as an attaché to his uncle Sir Henry Bulwer. Lytton's diplomatic career began in 1852. He was assigned to Florence. He worked in a number of other European cities like St. Petersburg, Vienna, Paris, before being appointed as the British Consul General in Belgrade in 1860. So in 1876, Lytton was eventually invited to be the Viceroy of India and also the Governor General of India. So Lytton, just like most of the viceroys before him, was coming with extensive amount of experience in administration, diplomacy, foreign craft, and he was going to come here to begin his experimentation with India's handling of affairs. Lytton's viceregality was characterized by ruthlessness, both in the domestic as well as the foreign affairs. When he came, India was actually in the grip of a great Indian famine, 1876, mainly primarily caused due to crop failure. And instead of handling the famine and helping people, Lytton is known to have actually even conducted the Great Darbar for Queen Victoria. In fact, that was what Lytton. So, at a time when India was going through a great famine, he actually conducted a great darbar. His administration's failure eventually led to a death of anywhere between 6.1 to 10 million people. Historians do speculate, or many historians of this period do understand, or they do guess that Lytton was probably a strong believer of social Darwinism. You know, that white man's burden philosophy. Lytton definitely was probably a man of that philosophy, and his attitude towards Indian peasants suffering from famine was very clear, visible to be a primarily act of social Darwinism. Now, Lytton did promote free trade because it suited the interests of industrially advanced nations. Free trade had, according to Lytton, free trade had to become a passion among the ruling circles in England. In fact, the Lancashire cotton manufacturers were very jealous about the newly coming cotton mills in Bombay, and they wanted the end of Bombay's cotton mills. These are new traders of Lancashire. They criticized the levies imposed on the goods exported to India, and they refer to this as defensive measure against laissez-faire, a capitalist philosophy. The British government passed the act and notified the Indian government that duties would be repealed when financial conditions permitted. Now, regardless of India's very poor financial situation as a result of the famine, Lytton still abolished numerous import duties for Indian goods. So, technically, Ripon removed Indian income only because he wanted to help British market. And the funny part is, India was still part of British India, still part of the British Empire. Lytton was also involved in the Second Anglo-Afghan War. The Russian and British empires were engaged in a series of political conflict in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan was a very important player in Asian politics at this time. So Lord Lytton made friendly relations with Sher Ali Khan of Afghanistan. Sher Ali was thought to be pro-Russian, and no effort, absolutely no effort, was spared by British to persuade Sher Ali to join the British side. Sir Neville Chamberlain was even sent as an envoy to Afghanistan in 1878. And Lytton even planned an invasion of Afghanistan after not being able to successfully convince Afghanistan after diplomatic options. And this idea that he's going to go for war instead of diplomacy is what we call the Second Anglo-Afghan War. The British did one of the battles, and Treaty of Gandamak was signed, which primarily made Afghanistan a puppet state, as the ruler of Afghanistan was essentially somebody directly under the control of British. Now, Lytton is most controversially known for his Vernacular Press Act, which he passed in 1876. By this act, district magistrates were empowered without prior punishment from the ground from the government to compel a printer or a publisher of any kind of material, and they had to guarantee this through a bond by depositing some money with the magistrate and giving an undertaking not to publish anything that might undermine the or even promote discontent against the government among the people. So basically, this Vernacular Press Act essentially was also commonly called Gagging Act. What it basically said is you can't publish anything which is critical of the government. Now, there is, however, one problem. As the word says, this idea that you have to submit a 10,000 rupee bond with the magistrate, and if the magistrate or the government feels that you have published something in your newspaper which is controversial about the king, emperor, or the ruler, or the British India, then you've lost the 30,000. Prosecution and punishment, that is different. This was just a bond money people had to pay. If the printer violates again, his press may be seized. In fact, she could actually got the press seized. The only advantage is she was not fighting with just the regular guys who had Congress on his back. And particularly the Gagging Act, which basically said that you deposit 10,000 or you stop your publications, made many newspapers to shut down, particularly vernacular newspapers, which is Indian languages newspapers. One of the language newspapers like Amrit Basar Patrika under Sisir Kumar Ghosh overnight converted to English. Lytton was quite known for this. Uh, when famine struck Bombay, Madras, and Hyderabad and Mysore, a population of 5.8 crore people were affected. More than 50 lakh people died in a single year. Government, however, only made very half-hearted, half-baked attempts. The government's famine machinery was completely insufficient. In 1878, a famine commission called the Strategy Commission was even commissioned, which was supposed to give provisions or gratuity assistance, and advocated for able-bodied men to be given jobs at wages sufficient to maintain their life. For this, Lytton recommended the construction of railways and irrigation. I mean, he also laid the groundwork for famine policy, but Lytton idea of putting that groundwork for railways and irrigation and thus giving employment to the famine affected was a suggestion given by the Strachey Financial Commission. Royal Titles Act 1878, passed by the British Parliament, also gave Queen Victoria a new title, Empress of India or Kaiser-e-Hind. On 1st of January 1877, a grand darbar was held in Delhi where all the dignitaries were invited, and mainly in order to show their loyalty towards Queen Victoria. The funny part is when this darbar was happening, India was still going through a famine. Unfortunately, darbar was actually felt at a time when there was severe famine and suffering and death due to hunger in India. Eventually, the people of India, even many educated, many urban class also considered this to be a direct insult. It was seen as a direct insult. People saw this as a direct insult. The Calcutta General even said Nero was fiddling while Rome burned. The Darbar, on the other hand, proved to be a blessing in disguise, despite the fact that it demoted princes from allies to feudatories. And the author of the Darbar Bill, unintentionally against his will, raised the status of Indian subjects to of the Queen to that of citizens of British Empire, encouraging people like Surendra Banerjee to eventually form Indian Association to address their grievances. See, as long as Lytton was there, Lytton created more trouble. Lytton was without a doubt a thinker, but he was absolute failure for India. His expertise was pretty limited. He was also racist. In fact, according to many historians, Lytton and a couple of years later, Curzon were two viceroys who actually ended up doing more harm to British India than to good for India. They both were very unpopular. They were well known for their repressive policies. The unrest they actually spread became dangerous. In fact, it was thanks to Lytton and thanks to Curzon that Indian national movement eventually became one of the most significant movements in India. Lytton was then followed by Lord Ripon. Lord Ripon from 1880 to 1884. With the coming of Lord Ripon, and that too particularly Ripon came after the period of Lord Lytton, and Lytton's presidency or Lytton's vice regality was extremely terrible for Indian history and Indian administration. Now, Lord Ripon, originally known as George Frederick Samuel Robinson, first Mark of Ripon, it was as with every viceroy that we observe, Ripon was actually not his real name. He was the Marquis of Ripon. That was actually his rank. He was a British politician who served in every Liberal cabinet since 1861. So he's been member of the Liberal group, the Liberal Party of Britain. Ripon was actually his given name. During his tenure in Viceroy, Lord Ripon instituted numerous reforms for India, mainly to alleviate the position of local Indians. He also introduced a local self-government. He was, in fact, it was one of his first experiments in British India. Also, the most significant of the reforms done by any viceroy after Canning. He's also known as the Good Viceroy of India because of the reforms that he has done. In 1880, it was William Gladstone who appointed Lord Ripon as the Viceroy of India. In one of his first acts, Ripon introduced Ilbert Bill, which eventually would become one of the most controversial bills, and indirectly would lead to the start of India's national movement. And despite a very progressive step, the Ilbert Bill was vehemently opposed by Europeans who were horrified by the prospects of actually being judged by a native Indian. So, because at that time when Ripon came, there was judicial discrimination between Indian judges and the British judges. And Ripon essentially wanted to remove that identification of British and Indian judges. He just wanted to maintain the identity as judge, and that regardless of which race the victim or the accused belonged to, the judge should not be judging on the basis of the race. He should just be giving judge justice on the basis of evidence. So Ripon wanted equality in judicial system, which obviously Britishers did not want to. A series of laws would eventually be established by Lord Ripon, and mainly to establish local self-government in India. He's also, that's why, known as the father of local self-government in India. And in fact, among all the reforms that Lord Ripon did, one of the most important reforms is the constitution of the Hunter Commission for Education, led by William Wilson Hunter, which called for large-scale educational reforms at both primary and secondary levels of education in India. Now, during Lippin's period, the first Factory Act was also passed, was also implemented, which restricted the working hours for Indians in local factory workers and sought to improve their working conditions. Ripon was also very instrumental in reorganizing the Madras Forestry Department and expansion of the systematic forestry conservation in India. So, Ilbert Bill, the Factories Act, the Education Commission, a lot of changes were being coming by Ripon. So, in 1882, it was Ripon resolution or Ripon's resolution which gave Indians the first state of liberty by instituting local self-government in India, something very similar to what we today call the panchayat system. Scheme of local self-government established the municipal institutions that had eventually grown up the country since the British Crown occupied in India, like Madras municipality, etc., had been given greater authority and legal sanctity. He oversaw a series of enactments that granted greater powers for these local governments, mainly both to rural and urban bodies, as well as expanded the voting rights of the electorate. Because of the numerous local self-government reforms, Lord Ripon came to be popularly known as the father of local self-government. This was not enacted by any act, but rather a resolution. So remember this. This is very important for you to remember. The local self-government system which Ripon introduced was not being done by a legal act, but rather through a Viceroy's resolution. Another important commission which Lord Ripon played a substantial role is the an education commission led by William Wilson Hunter. So there'll be two Hunter commissions that you will actually hear about. One is the Hunter Commission, which is for education during Lord Ripon's period. The other was this Hunter Committee, which will come much later. Hunter Committee is what investigated General Dyer's massacre of Punjabis in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. But this one is Hunter Commission. William Wilson Hunter was a statistician, compiler, Indian Civil Service member, who later became the vice president of the Royal Asiatic Society. In the year 1862, he was appointed the magistrate in Bengal Presidency. It was also the only from here that he began compiling local traditions and records. So he's coming with good amount of experience. Hunter Commission report or Hunter Commission's identification of the report was that there was a severe neglect of primary and secondary education in India. So primary education was now to be entrusted to local and municipal bodies, very similar to what we today have Zilla Parishad and municipal schools. The following were the most important suggestions of the Hunter Committee. Primary education was to be expanded by the government in a determined effort, in a concerted, continuous effort. Both literary and vocational instructions should be included in the secondary education. The commission also found that the country lacked adequate facilities for female education, and parts of proposal were obviously implemented. As with traditional British Indian government, everything could not be implemented, but Hunter Commission was a good start. Now, second most challenging important event of the Rippon's rule is the Ilbert Bill, introduced by the legal advisor and the legal member of the Viceroy's Council, C.P. Ilbert, Courtney Peregrine Ilbert. When Rippon came, Rippon observed that Indian judges were not having the right to give judgments or to sit on cases where the accused is a Britisher. Rippon saw this as a discrimination, racial prejudice. So Rippon proposed amending the existing laws to give Indian judges and magistrates authority to try and provide justice even if the accused is a Britisher. It was never previously permitted. So as a result, Europeans living in India generally saw this as a humiliation because they didn't want to be judged by an Indian judge. And so did Europeans abroad. As a result, it was withdrawn. It was reintroduced, but severely weakened form. The way how they weakened is, if there is an Indian judge sitting, the Indian judge must be assisted by a team of judicial advisors, the justice. Whereas if it's a British judge, he can give the judgment all by himself. So in a way, indirectly, Indian judges' power was still reduced. The amended bill provided for Indian judges and that Europeans would be conferred on both European and Indian magistrates and sessions judges. But yeah, Indian judge would be assisted by a jury. Indian judge will get an assistance by an active jury trial with at least half of the members being Europeans. Now, this was like pretty bad passage, and Ripon was never really happy about this. The passage of this bill opened Indians' eyes. Actually, the other nationalist leaders who were there in India, they opened their eyes and deepened antagonism between British and Indians. And most of these Indian leaders understood that nothing good can be expected from the British. As a result, this led to increase in nationalism of Indian National Congress, and the amended bill was eventually passed as Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Act 1884. The Ilbert Bill was actually a failure. It did indirectly help us. Eventually, Lord Ripon's tenure as a viceroy came to an end in 1884. He held a number of important positions eventually. Honorary Colonel of the 1st Volunteer Battalion of the Prince of Wales, Owen and Lord Lieutenant of the North Riding of Yorkshire. He was also a Freemason serving in the provincial Grand Master of the West Riding and Deputy Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. And overall, Ripon had a fantastic career based on some of the important contributions he's done for us local self-government, the Factories Act, Hunter Commission, an attempt to bring equality for Indians along with Europeans under the British government, gave him the title the good Viceroy. Eventually, Ripon died in London. He was laid to rest at St. Mary's Church. And the Ripon Street in Calcutta is named after him. Ripon Club in Mumbai is named after him. The Ripon Building in Madras, which is also the office of the municipality of Madras of Chennai, is currently named after him. The Ripon Club in Mumbai, which was actually founded in 1884 by the Parsi community, he is named after him as a respectful thing. Ripon comes from one of the very rare viceroys who still has a good amount of respect and value among Indians and Indian historians of those who are involved with the study of modern Indian history. That's it. That's the story of Lord Lytton and Lord Ripon. While Lytton was this extreme viceroy, Ripon was this good viceroy. While both of them tried to do everything that they could, this series of events between Lytton and Ripon eventually led to the beginnings of the Indian national movement. Now, which viceroy contributed in the starting of Indian national movement? We will see in the next session. Meanwhile, do like, subscribe, and follow on this video. Do check the other videos of my channel. I've already put the stories of Canning, Elgin, May, and all the viceroys before Lord Lieutenant, Lord Ripon. Thank you. Bye bye. I'll see you in the next video.